Hi, my sweet friends, and welcome back to Crochet Every Day with Judy. We're reading again from Robinson Crusoe. Today we're starting with Chapter 13, Deliverance. I was fast asleep in my hut one morning when my man Friday came running into me and called aloud, "Master, master, they are come, they are come." I jumped up and, regardless of danger, went out as soon as I could get my clothes on through my little grove. I went without my arms, which it was not my custom to do. I was surprised when, turning my eyes to the sea, I presently saw a boat at about 1.5 leagues distance, standing in for the shore with the shoulder of mutton sail, as they call it. The wind was blowing pretty fair to bring them in. Also, I observed that they did not come from that side which the shore lay on, but from the southernmost end of the island. Upon this I called Friday in and bade him lie close, for these were not the people we looked for, and we did not know yet whether they were friends or enemies. In the next place I went in to get my perspective glass to see what I could make of them. When I had taken the ladder out, I climbed up to the top of the hill, as I used to do when I was apprehensive of anything, to take my view plainer without being discovered. I had scarcely set my foot upon the hill when my eye plainly discovered a ship lying at anchor, and about 2.5 leagues distance from me, southeast, but not more than 1.5 leagues from the shore. It appeared plainly to be an English ship, and the boat of an English longboat. I had not been long in this position when I saw the boat draw near the shore, as if they looked for a creek to thrust in at for the convenience of landing. However, as they did not come quite far enough, they did not see the little inlet where I formerly landed my rafts, but ran their boat on shore upon the beach at about 1/2 mile from me, which was very fortunate for me. Otherwise, they would have landed just, as I may say, at my door, and would soon have beaten me out of my castle and perhaps have plundered me of all I had. When they were on shore, I was fully satisfied they were Englishmen, at least most of them. 1 or 2 I thought were Dutch, but they did not prove so. There were in all 11 men. 3 I found were unarmed, and, as I thought, bound. When the first 4 or 5 of them had jumped on shore, they took these 3 out of the boat as prisoners. One of the 3 I could perceive was using the most passionate gestures of entreaty, affliction, and despair. The other 2 lifted up their hands sometimes and appeared concerned indeed, but not so much as the first. I was perfectly confounded at the sight and knew not what the meaning of it could be. Friday called out to me in English as well as he could, "Oh, master, you see Englishmans eat prisoners as well as savage mans." "Why," said I, "do you think they are going to eat them then?" "Yes," says Friday, "they will eat them." "No, no," said I. "Friday, I am afraid they will murder them indeed, but you may be sure that they will not eat them." All this while I had no thought of what the matter really was, but expected every moment that the 3 prisoners would be killed. Once I saw one of the villains lift a great cutlass or sword to strike one of the poor men, and I expected every moment to see him fall. I wished heartily now for my Spaniard and the savage that had gone with him. I wished, too, that I had a way to come undiscovered within shot of the newcomers, that I might rescue the 3 men, for the sailors had no firearms that I saw. After the 3 men had been outrageously used by the insolent seamen, I saw that the fellows ran scattering about the land as if they wanted to see the country. I observed also that the 3 other men had liberty to go where they pleased, but that they sat down all 3 upon the ground, very pensive, and looked like men in despair. It was just at the top of high water when these people came on shore, and they stood parleying with the prisoners they brought, and they rambled about to see what kind of place they were in so long that they carelessly stayed till the tide was spent, and the water had ebbed considerably away, leaving the boat aground. They had left 2 men in the boat, who, as I found afterwards, had drunk a little too much brandy and had fallen asleep. However, one of them, wakening sooner than the other, and finding the boat too fast aground for him to stir her, hallooed for the rest, who were straggling about. Upon this, they all soon came to the boat, but it was past all their strength to launch her, for the boat was very heavy, and the shore on that side was a soft, oozy sand, almost like a quicksand. Under these circumstances, like true seamen, who are perhaps the least of all mankind given to forethought, they gave it up, and away they strolled about the country again. I heard one of them say aloud to another, calling them off from the boat, "Why, let her alone, Jack, can't you? She'll float next tide." By this I was fully confirmed what countrymen they were. In the meantime, I fitted myself up for a battle, as before, though with more caution, knowing that I had to do with another kind of enemy than I had at first. I ordered Friday also to load himself with arms. I took myself 2 fowling pieces, and I gave him 3 muskets. My figure indeed was very fierce. I had my formidable goatskin coat on, with the great cap I have mentioned, a naked sword by my side, 2 pistols in my belt, and a gun upon each shoulder. It was my design not to have made any attempt until it was dark, but about 2 o'clock in the heat of the day I found that they had all gone straggling into the woods, and as I thought, had all laid down to sleep. The 3 poor, distressed men, too anxious for their condition to get any sleep, had, however, sat down under the shelter of a great tree at about 1/4 of a mile from me, and as I thought, out of sight of any of the rest. Upon this, I resolved to discover myself to them and learn something of their condition. Immediately, I marched toward them with my man Friday at a good distance behind me. He was as formidably armed as I, excuse me, but he did not make quite so staring a spectre-like figure as I did. I came as near them undiscovered as I could, and then before any of them saw me, I called aloud to them in Spanish, "What are ye, gentlemen?" They started up at the noise, but were 10 times more confounded when they saw me and the uncouth figure I made. They made no answer at all, but I thought I perceived them just going to fly from me, so I spoke to them in English. "Gentlemen," said I, "do not be surprised at me. Perhaps you may have a friend near you when you do not expect it." "He must be sent directly from heaven, then," said one of them very gravely to me, and pulling off his hat at the same time, "for our condition is past the help of man." "All help is from heaven, sir," said I, "but can you put a stranger in the way how to help you? You seem to be in some great distress. I saw you when you landed, and when you seemed to make application to the brutes that came with you, I saw one lift his sword to kill you." The poor man, with tears running down his face and trembling, looked like one astonished, returned, "Am I talking to God or man? Is it a real man or an angel?" "Be in no fear about that, sir," said I. "If God had sent an angel to relieve you, he would have come better clothed and armed after another manner than you see me. Pray lay aside your fears. I am a man, an Englishman, and disposed to assist you, you see. I have one servant only, but we have arms and ammunition. Tell us freely, can we serve you? What is your case?" "Our case, sir," said he, "is too long to tell you while our murderers are so near, but in short, sir, I was commander of that ship. My men have mutinied against me. They have been with difficulty prevailed upon not to murder me, and at last have set me on shore in this desolate place, with these 2 men with me, one my mate, the other a passenger. We expected to perish here, believing the place to be uninhabited. Indeed, we know not yet what to think of it." "Where are those brutes, your enemies?" said I. "Do you know where they are gone?" "There they are, sir," he said, pointing to a thicket of trees. "My heart trembles for fear they have seen us and heard you speak. If they have, they will murder us all." "Have they any firearms?" I asked. He answered, "They had only 2 pieces and one which they left in the boat." "Well then," said I, "leave the rest to me. I see they are asleep. It is an easy thing to kill them all, but shall we rather take them prisoners?" He told me that there were 2 desperate villains among them, that it was scarcely safe to show any mercy to, but if they were secured, he believed all the rest would return to their duty. I asked him which they were. He told me that he could not, at that distance, describe them, but he would obey my orders in anything I would direct. "Well," said I, "let us retreat out of their view or hearing, lest they awake, and we will resolve farther." So they willingly went back with me till the woods covered us from them. "Look you, sir," said I, "if I venture upon your deliverance, are you willing to make 2 conditions with me?" He anticipated my proposals by telling me that both he and the ship, if recovered, should be wholly directed and commanded by me in everything. If the ship was not recovered, he would live and die with me in whatsoever part of the world I would send him. The 2 others said the same. "Well," said I, "my conditions are but 2. In the first place, while you stay on this island with me, you will not pretend to any authority here. If I put arms in your hands, you will, upon all occasions, give them up to me. You will do no harm to me or mine upon this island, and in the meantime, you will be governed by my orders. In the second place, if the ship is, or may be, recovered, you will carry me and my man to England, passage free." He gave me all the assurances that the invention and faith of man could devise, that he would comply with these most reasonable demands, and besides would owe his life to me and acknowledge it upon all occasions as long as he lived. "Well then," said I, "here are 3 muskets for you with powder and ball. Tell me next what you think is proper to be done." He showed all the testimony of his gratitude that he was able, but offered to be wholly guided by me. I told him that I thought it was hard venturing anything, but the best method I could think of was to fire upon them at once as they lay. If any were not killed at the first volley and offered to submit, we might save them, and so put it wholly upon God's providence to direct the shot. He said very modestly that he was loath to kill them if he could help it, but that those 2 were incorrigible villains, and had been the authors of all this mutiny in the ship, and if they escaped we should be undone still, for they would go on board and bring the whole ship's company and destroy us all. Well then, said I, necessity legitimates my advice, for it is the only way to save our lives. However, seeing him still cautious of shedding blood, I told him they should go themselves and manage as they found convenient. In the middle of this discourse, we heard some of them awake, and soon after we saw 2 of them on their feet. I asked him if they were the men who, he said, were the heads of the mutiny. He said no. Well then, said I, you may let them escape. Providence seems to have awakened them on purpose to save themselves. Now, said I, if the rest escape you, it is your fault. Animated with this, he took the musket I had given him in his hand, and a pistol in his belt, and his 2 comrades with him, each man a piece in his hand. The 2 men who were with him, going first, made some noise, at which one of the seamen, who was awake, turned about, and seeing them coming, cried out to the rest. It was too late then, for the moment he cried out, the 2 men fired, the captain wisely reserving his own piece. They had so well aimed their shot at the men they knew, that one of them was killed on the spot, and the other very much wounded. But not being dead, he started up upon his feet and called eagerly for help to the other. The captain, stepping to him, told him that it was too late to cry for help. He should call upon God to forgive his villainy, and with that word knocked him down with the stock of his musket, so that he never spoke more. There were 3 more in the company, and one of them was also slightly wounded. By this time I was come, and when they saw their danger, and that it was in vain to resist, they begged for mercy. The captain told them he would spare their lives if they would give him any assurance of their abhorrence of the treachery they have been guilty of, and would swear to be faithful to him in recovering the ship, and afterwards in carrying her back to Jamaica, from whence they came. They gave him all the protestations of their sincerity that could be desired, and he was willing to believe them and spare their lives, which I was not against. However, I obliged him to keep them bound hand and foot while they were upon the island. While this was doing, I sent Friday with the ship with the captain's mate to the boat with orders to secure her and bring away the oars and sail, which they did. By and by, 3 straggling men that were parted from the rest came back again upon hearing the guns fired, and seeing their captain, who was before their prisoner, now their conqueror, they submitted to being bound also. It now remained that the captain and I should inquire into one another's circumstances. I began first and told him my whole history, which he heard with amazed attention. He was particularly astounded at the wonderful manner of my being furnished with provisions and ammunition, and indeed, as my story is a whole collection of wonders, it affected him deeply. When he reflected from thence upon himself, and how I seemed to have been preserved there on purpose to save his life, the tears ran down his face, and he could not speak a word more. After this communication was at an end, I carried him and his 2 men into my apartment, leading them in just where I came out at the top of the house. I refreshed them with such provisions as I had, and showed them all the contrivances I had made during my long stay in this place. All I showed them, all I said to them, was perfectly amazing, but above all, the captain admired my fortification, and how perfectly I had concealed my retreat with a grove of trees. They had been planted now nearly 20 years. The trees grew much faster than in England, so that it had become a little wood, and so thick that it was impassable except at that one side where I had reserved my little winding passage into it. This, I told him, was my castle and my residence, but that I had a seat in the country, as most princes have, whither I could retreat upon occasion, and I would show him that too another time. At present, however, our business was to consider how to recover the ship. He agreed with me as to that, but he told me that he was perfectly at a loss what measures to take, because there were still 26 hands on board. They had entered into a cursed conspiracy, by which they had all forfeited their lives to the law, and they would be hardened in it now by desperation, and would carry it on, knowing that if they were captured, they should be brought to the gallows as soon as they came to England or to any of the English colonies. Therefore, there would be no use attacking them with so small a number as we were. I mused for some time upon what he had said, and found that it was a very rational conclusion. It occurred to me, too, that in a little while the ship's crew, wondering what had become of their comrades and of the boat, would certainly come on shore in their other boat to look for them. Then, perhaps, they might come armed and be too strong for us. This, the captain agreed, was likely. Upon this, I told him that the first thing we had to do was to stave the boat, which lay upon the beach, so that they might not carry her off, and taking everything out of her, leave her so useless as not to be fit to float. Accordingly, we went on board, took the arms which are left on board out of her, and whatever else we found there, which was a bottle of brandy and another of rum, a few biscuit cakes, a horn of powder, and a great lump of sugar and a piece of canvas. The sugar was 5 or 6 pounds. All this was very welcome to me, especially the sugar, which I had been without many years. When we had carried all these things on shore, we knocked a great hole in her bottom, so that if they came strong enough to master us, yet they could not carry off the boat. Indeed, it was not much in my thoughts that we could recover the ship. My view was that if they went away without the boat, I did not much question to make her fit again to carry us away to the Leeward Islands and call upon our friends the Spaniards on my way. While we were thus preparing our plans, we first, by main strength, heaved the boat up on the beach so high that the tide would not float her off at high water mark. Besides, we broke a hole in her bottom too big to be quickly stopped. While we sat musing what we should do, we heard the ship fire a gun and saw her make a waft with her ancient as a signal for the boat to come on board. When no boat stirred, they fired several times, making other signals. At last, when all their signals and firings proved fruitless, and they found that the boat did not stir, we saw them, by the help of my glasses, hoist another boat off and row toward the shore. Excuse me. We found, as they approached, that there were no less than 10 men in her, and that they had firearms with them. As the ship lay almost 2 leagues from the shore, we had a full view of them as they came. The captain knew the persons and characters of all the men in the boat, of whom he said there were 3 very honest fellows, who he was sure were led into this conspiracy by the rest, being overpowered and frightened. As for the boatswain, who it seems was the chief officer among them, and all the rest, they were as outrageous as any of the ship's crew, and were no doubt made desperate in their new enterprise. We had, upon the first sign of the boats coming from the ship, separated our prisoners and secured them effectually. 2 of them, of whom the captain was less assured than ordinary, I sent with Friday, and 1 of the 3 delivered men to my cave, where they were remote enough and out of danger of being heard or discovered or finding their way out of the woods. They left them bound, but gave them provisions and promised them, if they continued there quietly, to give them their liberty in a day or 2. Excuse me. But they assured them that if they attempted their escape, they should be put to death without mercy. The prisoners promised faithfully to bear their confinement with patience. The other prisoners had better usage. 2 of them were kept bound indeed, because the captain did not like to trust them. But the other 2 were taken into my service upon their captain's recommendation, and upon their solemnly engaging to live and die with us. As soon as the newcomers got to the place where their other boat lay, they ran their boat into the beach, and came all on shore, hauling the boat up after them, which I was glad to see. I had been afraid that they would leave the boat and anchor some distance from the shore with some hands in her to guard her, so that we should not be able to seize the boat. When they were on shore, they all ran to the other boat, and it was easy to see that they were greatly surprised to find her stripped and a great hole in the bottom. After this, they set up a great shout, but it was all to no purpose. Then they came all close in a ring and fired a volley of their small arms, which indeed we heard, and the echoes made the woods ring, but it was all one. Those in the cave we were sure could not hear, and those in our keeping, though they heard it well enough, yet dared give no answer to them. They were so surprised at this, as they told us afterwards, that they resolved to go on board their ship again, and let their friends there know that the men were all murdered and the longboat staved. Accordingly, they immediately launched their boat again and got all of them on board. The captain was terribly amazed and even confounded at this, believing they would go on board the ship again and set sail, giving their comrades up for lost. In that case, he would still lose the ship, for which he was in hopes we should have recovered. Before long, however, he was as much frightened the other way. They had not put off far with the boat when we perceived them all coming on shore again. They left 3 men in the boat, and the rest went up into the country to look for their fellows. This was a great disappointment to us, for now we were at a loss what to do. Our seizing those 7 men on shore would be no advantage to us if we let the boat escape, because the others would then row away to the ship, and the rest of them would be sure to weigh and set sail, and so our hope of recovering the ship would be lost. However, we had no remedy but to wait and see what the issue of things might present. The 7 men came on shore, and the 3 who remained in the boat put her off to a good distance from the shore, and came to an anchor to wait for them, so that it was impossible for us to come at them in the boat. Those that came on shore kept close together, marching toward the top of the little hill under which my dwelling lay, and we could see them plainly, though they could not perceive us. When they came to the brow of the hill, where they could see a great way into the valleys and woods which lay toward the northeast part, and where the island lay lowest, they shouted till they were weary, and then they sat down to consider the situation. Had they gone to sleep there, as the other party did, they would have done the job for us, but they were too full of apprehension of danger to venture to go to sleep, though they could not tell what the danger was. The captain suggested that perhaps they would all fire a volley again to endeavor to make their fellows hear, and then we could all sally upon them just at the juncture when their pieces were all discharged, and they would certainly yield, and we should have them without bloodshed. I liked the proposal, provided it was done while we were near enough to come up to them before they could load their pieces again. But this event did not happen, and we lay still a long time, very irresolute what course to take. At length I told him there was nothing to be done, in my opinion, till night. Then, if they did not return to the boat, perhaps we might use some stratagem to get those in the boat on shore. We waited a great while very impatiently. When we finally saw them all start up and march toward the sea, we were uneasy. It seems that they had such dreadful apprehensions upon them of the danger of the place that they resolved to go on board the ship again, give their companions up for lost, and so go on their intended voyage with the ship. As soon as I perceived them going toward the shore, I imagined that they had given up their search and were going back. The captain was ready to sink when I told him my thoughts, but I presently thought of a stratagem to bring them back again, which answered my end to a tittle. I ordered Friday and the captain's mate to go over the little creek westward toward the place where Friday was rescued, and at about half a mile distance, to halloo as loud as they could. As soon as they heard the seaman answer them, they were to return it, and then, keeping out of sight, take a round and wheel about again to me by such ways as I directed. The men were just going into the boat when Friday and the mate hallooed, and they presently heard them, and answering, ran along the shore westward toward the voice they heard. They were stopped by the creek, the water being up, they could not get over, and called for the boat to come and set them over, as indeed I had expected. When they had set themselves over, I observed that they took one of the 3 men out of her and left only 2 there. The boat they fastened to a stump of a little tree on the shore. This was what I wished for. Leaving Friday and the captain's mate to their business, I took the rest with me, and crossing the creek out of the sight of the men, we surprised them before they were aware. One of them was lying on the shore between sleeping and waking, and as he was starting up, the captain, who was foremost, ran in upon him and knocked him down. He then called to the man in the boat to yield, or he was a dead man. Very few arguments were needed to persuade a single man to yield when he saw 5 men upon him and his comrade knocked down. Besides, this was, it seems, one of the 3 men who were not so hardy in the mutiny as the rest of the crew. Therefore, he was easily persuaded not only to yield, but afterwards to join very sincerely with us. In the meantime, Friday and the captain's mate so well managed their business with the rest that they drew them, by hallooing and answering, from one wood to another, till they not only heartily tired them, but left them where they were sure they could not get back before it was dark. Indeed, Friday and the mate were heartily tired themselves also by the time they came back to us. It was several hours after Friday came back to me before the men came back to their boat. We could hear the foremost of them long before they quite came up, calling to those behind to come, and could hear them answer and complain how lame and tired they were, and not able to come any faster, which was very welcome news to us. At length they came up to the boat, but it is impossible to express their confusion when they found the boat fast aground in the creek, and their 2 men gone. We could hear them telling one another that they had gotten into an enchanted island. They were sure that either there were inhabitants in it, and they should all be murdered, or else there were devils or spirits in it, and they should be carried away and devoured. I think we're going to stop there and start next time with the second half of this chapter, because it's quite a long one, and it is the last one. So thank you, my friends, for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.